Hey, Pat, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. It's so great to see you, sir.
You as well. Thank you.
We want to jump right in. You're the superintendent of the Bloomfield schools here in Michigan, and been doing that for a few years now. But it all started, I think, going way back to 10th grade. So could you share that powerful story with the audience here?
Yeah. So, growing up, I had moved around quite a bit. Kindergarten, I went to 4 different kindergartens in 1 year. That's not something normally most parents have their children do. And, kind of worked my way through school and, really had, some struggles in particular with mental health. And, things were really difficult in my family, 10th grade year, just a lot of negative things going on. And, at that point, I thought, maybe it just isn't worth it anymore. Maybe I'm better off if I'm not here, I'm not around. And so I had kind of skipped school for about a whole week, didn't show up, and decided that, you know what, I'm going to go to school one last day. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. And then that's kind of it, had a plan for, how I would take my own life. And, so I show up to school, and it's on a Monday, and one of the first people I see is Miss Davis. And she looks at me and she says, "Pat, how are you? Where have you been? I haven't seen you. We've missed you." And that was the first time I really felt that there was an adult that really cared about me, that really saw me. And it was literally at that moment that I decided, you know what? I'm not going to do what I had planned. If nothing else, I've got Miss Davis. She cares about me. She actually noticed I wasn't there. And she wasn't even my teacher that year. But she knew me through athletics and some other things. And that really meant the world to me in that moment. And it's led me to the point where I'm very passionate about mental health work. I've done a lot of work in that space. I sit on 2 boards that work on suicide prevention. And so it's been a passion of mine. And I still see Miss Davis now. Here we are over 30 years later. She is still someone I can talk to. She's still a part of my life. And I see her probably every other weekend playing pickleball, which is kind of something I picked up as well. And it gives us a chance to say hello and connect. And, I share with her, how she literally saved my life. How if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have the family I have now. My wife of almost 30 years, 3 unbelievable kids. And it's just meant a lot. And when it came time for what do I want to do with my life? Where do I want to be a doctor? Do I want to be a police officer? What do I want to do for a career? For me, I knew it was education, because I knew I couldn't be the only person out there that was struggling with these things and thinking of these things. And if there was a way I could somehow, even if it was just for one person, make a difference in their life and give back, that education was something I had to do. And so this is my 29th year in education, and I don't know if I've made a difference or not, but I know I've made every effort to be there for the students I've had. I've always told my students that, I'm not your teacher for this year. I'm your teacher for life. You can reach out to me and talk to me anytime. I've said the same thing as the building principal, and I say the same thing now as the superintendent. And there are students I talk to that are now in their early and mid 40s that I'm still in contact with on a regular basis. And I've watched them grow up and go through life and have children and become successful. And it's just phenomenal.
Wow, that's I've heard the story before, Pat, obviously, but every time I hear it, it's like it hits me in a different way. And what struck me about it this time was just how powerful a motivator that must be in your life, to be doing what you're doing now and to have that ever present for you. How do you use that on a daily basis with the work you're doing now, serving thousands of students?
Top of mind always is every single person you come in contact with every day, they have a struggle that you don't know about. There's something going on in their life. And so as I work with students, staff, community members, I try to keep that front of mind because you don't know what people are going through. And a lot of times, especially coming off of, if we're off of COVID, who knows? But dealing with some of the things that people said and some of the emails, just understanding that they're dealing with something, right? Is it really personal when people are really upset? And that, it's so important to be kind to people and treat people with dignity and respect. We're losing a lot of, in my opinion, the civil discourse. Watch the most recent debate for, the upcoming election for governor, a lot of finger pointing, name calling, and things like that. Things we tell our students you can't do, right? If you're doing a debate in your class, you would say, that's not how you have a debate. That's not acceptable. We don't talk to people like that. Here's the structure you need to follow. And just trying to make sure I do those things I would expect others to do. Which honestly, to me, treating people with dignity and respect is the bare minimum.
Yeah. And especially these last few years, I know have been challenging for all school superintendents across the country and around the world, really. And you've always maintained that cool, calm demeanor. And I love that there's an angle here that it's really about being of service to the other people, to be that way, so that you're able to help them, because you never know what they're struggling with, whether that's a board member or a parent who's outraged or a student who's done something that is regrettable, that really they deserve that dignity and respect as a starting point.
Right. And life is hard, right? And so we all have to learn how to do hard better. So often we fall into the trap of, if I can just get through this week, it's going to be better. If I can just get to Thanksgiving break, it's going to be okay. If I can just get to winter break, it's going to be okay. If I can just get to spring break, if I just get to the summer. At some point, we need to shift our mindset. We just have to do hard better. Life is hard, right? Yet for many of us, we still have it better than the majority of the world. Poverty in the United States is still at a high level. My son traveled to Senegal in West Africa over winter break last year. Poverty looks different in different countries, right? So we have to learn, how do we do hard better? Because it's great to look forward to things. We all look forward to things. I'm not saying you shouldn't look forward to a great golf outing you're going to have with your buddies on the weekend. But those things that are hard in life, there always will be something that's going to be hard. That's going to be a challenge. So we really need to do hard better.
I love that. Need to learn how to do hard better. It's I just read a book called Life is Messy by Matthew Kelly. And it's part of his point is just that life is messy. That's not a debate. And so much of our angst, so much of the mental energy that we expend is trying to get control over life that is not controllable. And the more we can let go, paradoxically, the more freeing it is, but it's hard to remember that, especially in those difficult moments. How do you, when you're in the moment, when you're in a particularly challenging, let's say, board meeting, or a particularly challenging meeting with a parent or a set of parents, how do you maintain that sense of mental control?
I think parents would be a good example, right? Because everyone should advocate for their child. And I've done it for my 3 children. So when I'm in those type of contentious meetings with parents, I don't take it as a personal attack on me or the school district. They're advocating for their child. So I look at it from the lens of, what can I do in my position that is appropriate to support what their child needs? Because if you have children, you should advocate. Everyone should. And I just try to remember that in that moment, it's about the kids, right? How do we get the adult issues out of the way? As someone that coached for a long time, same type of thing. How do we get the adult issues out of the way so kids can have the most enjoyable experience? But for kids, so much of school is about moments and memories, right? I graduated way back in the 80s. I'm not going to have a conversation with you where I say, you know what? In 1986, in sophomore algebra 2, when we had the lesson on logarithms,
The exit ticket was amazing at the end, right? No one says that. Kids don't talk like that. But it's, my teacher did this. My teacher did that. This occurred at school. That was fun. We heard a funny story. It's about making those moments. We went to homecoming. We went to prom. You know, I can't tell you what I had for dinner last week, but I can walk you through the Ann Arbor Huron Ann Arbor Pioneer football game in October of 1988 and how we blocked a punt at the end of the game, ran it back for a touchdown, beat Pioneer, were SEC champs, and who came on the field with us to celebrate, and how we went to the Arb afterwards and hung out and talk. Like, I can talk to you about that like it was yesterday, but I can't tell you what I had for dinner, right? It's about moments and memories. And so that's the focus.
Yeah. Moments and memories and keeping a perspective. You said earlier, you know, that we gotta realize how good we have it, you know, in this country. I remember Mother Teresa saying, you're poor, and she was talking to Americans, you're poor, live like kings and queens compared to the poor back in India. And I think that's true no matter what level we're at, that we're always comparing, we're always got ourselves stuck in the land of judgment and comparison, and it steals so much of our joy and steals so much of our perspective that, boy, oh boy, in general, we have it quite good if we could just remember that on a daily basis. How do you think about this, or how do you apply this to the work of leadership? Obviously, you're school superintendent, you've been doing it for a few years now. You're looking to build your team, make a stronger team, build the culture, make it a higher performing culture. Talk to us a little bit about your philosophy for building culture.
To me, a big part of that is setting a vision, but more importantly, is building those relationships. And the only way I know how to do that is one conversation at a time. I feel you really have to invest in people, and people need to know you care. You know, it's important for me to know as much as I can about all the people I work with, and, you know, what do they enjoy? What do they do for fun? What are the concerns they have? In particular, teaching staff, right? So if you're a 27-year-old teacher in your third year and you're not married, what's top of mind to you is going to be different than when you've been a teacher for 20 years and you've got 2, 3, or 4 kids at home and you're married and you're trying to plan for college, right? Your priorities change. And to try to be present in those conversations and to be not just visible, but engaged, right? It's one thing to walk through a building and everyone can say, yeah, we saw Pat, he walked through the building. We see him once a month, he walks through the building. But am I taking the time to engage at a personal level with everyone and know about them and know their name and know the name of their significant other and know what they did during the summer or what they're looking forward to? To me, that's how you build culture, because people need to know you care. And to me, one way I feel people know, or that I can show them I care, is really knowing about them and who they are. Right? So if you said to me in the conversation, oh, we're vegetarian, and then we had a meeting that I knew you were going to be at, and I made sure you had a vegetarian meal, and you said, oh, I didn't even think to ask for a vegetarian meal. How did this happen? Oh, Pat mentioned something. He said you were vegetarian, you want a vegetarian, right? That shows I've invested in you. And I think those are the things that I'm trying to exhibit and also model, because those are the expectations I have for everyone in a leadership position, which is everyone in the district. You don't need a title to be a leader. I think that's a misconception. As a former coach, I'd always have a player would say, well, I really wanted to be a captain this year so I could be a leader. You don't need a title to be a leader. You can lead, right? And so that's the way I view it. Everyone should be a leader.
Yeah, I've told this story before, but the most inspiring person I've met, the most inspiring leader I've met in the last 7 years of doing this work across the country, what would you guess was her title, Pat?
Kindergarten teacher.
Close. I did have a kindergarten teacher when I was a superintendent who, Donnie, he was 6'8", working with all these little kids. It was awesome. And he was great, but no, not that. It was a janitor at Wayne State University. this woman was on fire for what she did. Absolutely came in and lit up a room with how excited she was about providing a safe and clean space for kids so that they could grow up and go out and serve the world, because they deserve that honor and dignity and respect, because they came from, a lot of them came from challenging backgrounds. And, you know, she just went on and on. And it was like, you know, the hair on your neck would stand up. And it's a great example because she didn't have a single person reporting to her, right? And she didn't have a title that the world really thinks much of, right? And yet she was an unbelievable leader because she could inspire people for a much bigger purpose. And I think that's something that all of us leaders could use a dose of reality on, is that it's not about the title, you know, it's about who we're being, and it's about how we show up for people. You actually did this for the audience before we started recording. Pat asked me, we haven't talked in a few months, and Pat said, how's your basement? Which is amazing that he remembered. I had a water leak issue, and then he took the time to ask. And so you really do live this stuff, Pat. You really do show that you care for your people around you and in your life. So what about getting results? You know, school systems, running schools, leading schools is challenging work for sure, no matter where you're serving, whether it's in the inner city of Detroit like I was, or it's in an affluent district outside of a city. You know, being in education, especially the last couple of years, is challenging. And so how do you think about producing results, and what does success look like in a school system, in your opinion?
So I think, you know, what does success look like? To me, it's a loaded question. Depends on the parent, right? For some parents, it's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 AP classes, 1580 on the SAT, worst case scenario, admission to U of M, because they couldn't get in an Ivy. Did not get in an Ivy. For others, success is measured as my son graduated. My child no longer self-harms, right? So it is all based on your perspective. As far as like my view, there's several data points. One obviously is academic achievement. And again, we'll measure it as a system, which with this year's scores, we did really well. You know, we were the only school in Oakland County that raised the math and the ELA scores from our 2019 scores. We're one of the few in the state that actually did it.
Wow.
Which is great, but if your child's not one of those students, and your student actually fell behind, what does that mean to you, right? Your child still needs additional help. I can't sit here and say, did you not see the rankings? Did you not see how well we did? Because that doesn't apply to your child though, right? So how's that relevant to you? It's very important that we continue to teach our students to be critical thinkers. And now with the access to media from all over the world at all times, how are you a critical consumer of media, of news? How do you vet it, right? I remember, gosh, this is before COVID. I can't remember the exact story, but I watched 4 news channels. I watched
the CNN broadcasts, got a report on it. I watched Al Jazeera, got a report on it. I watched BBC out of Canada, got a report on it, and watched Fox News. I felt like I was watching 4 different stories, but it was all on the same topic. And I'm thinking, I don't even know where to go with this. You know, here I am, multiple degrees, pay attention to what's going on. I couldn't imagine 15, 16-year-old me looking at a phone and thinking, oh my gosh, well, if it's on the internet, it's real. Like if it's on Twitter, if it's on Instagram, this is real. This has to be what it is. So having our students become critical thinkers. We also want them to be engaged citizens, right? Show up, participate. And that goes back to being a critical thinker. You can decide to feel however you feel, but make sure you've weighed the evidence, you've done your due diligence research. And then how are we giving our students, providing them opportunities to have coping skills, to learn coping skills? You know, every time we do something for our child, we take an opportunity away for them to grow and learn. But I get, you know, as a parent of 3, that other perspective, which is, I don't want them to be unhappy. I want to make sure they know I support them. You know, and it's really, I think that tide's really turned in my opinion, maybe a little too much. And we do too much for our children. I know I did that with my son, my oldest, and I was better by then. Here's what I mean. You know, oh, you forgot your lunch? I'll call your mom. Your mom will bring it to you. Don't worry about it. And that happened throughout elementary school. My youngest one, she didn't forget her lunch until first grade, and the school reached out. I told her, okay, well, she'll eat when she gets home. She'll be fine. She's not going to die. So what did she do? She figured it out. She talked to the lunch lady, made a deal, wrote an IOU note, got a lunch. She never forgot her lunch again. Right? So how do we provide those opportunities for them to learn, to grow, to problem solve, you know, to say, you know what, you should go talk to your teacher. You should go talk to your coach, as opposed to, oh, I'll talk to your teacher. I'll talk to your coach. So if we have students that been able to reach their own academic achievement level, their own ability to critical think, and have coping skills so that they're able to be more successful, because everyone, you know, we can have this debate about what do you need 2 years of a language for? Why do you have to get through algebra 2 if you end up, you know, doing whatever job? But there's no one who's not going to need to know how to leverage coping skills to get through life. Money doesn't solve that. Your parents can't solve everything. You can't solve everything. And if you don't have that skill to fall back on, then what?
Yeah,
Then we see what we're seeing now. Look at the CDC report. Look at the Surgeon General's report regarding mental health and suicidal ideations and suicides, and the level of 504s, number of 504s being written for anxiety and for depression. It's off the charts.
one of my hypotheses or my theories on this, Pat, is that parents have learned have forgotten how to say no, N-O, to their kids. What do you think about that?
I think so. I know I was bad with my son again, but by the time we got to the third kid, my wife and I, we feel like we had it down. And it was no. You know, example was at nighttime, all the cell phones, all the devices, go to bed downstairs. Adults and kids, everyone. No iPhones, no iPads, nothing goes upstairs. Everything goes to bed at the end of the night, period. And I know our kids, especially our oldest at the time, you know, were reluctant, didn't like the idea, but it was no, just like TVs. Nope, nothing. You can read a book, you'll be fine. And I think it's sometimes hard. I think a lot of times, you know, you want to be there for your kids, and you know, there's always like, well, I want to make sure they know I care, and I want my kid to like me too. You know, eventually, you know, my wife and I got to realize they may not like us for a while, and we might have to figure it out when they're older and see what happens. But in the meantime, this is what it's going to be. This is not a negotiation. This is a final decision.
Well, and those go part and parcel together. It's wanting to be liked and not saying no. You know, a lot of parents, I think, confuse those things, and our job, at least in my opinion, is not to be liked by our children. Our job is to help raise them and to help protect them from frankly, the evils of the world. I just listened to this amazing speaker, Chris McKenna's his name, with Protect Young Eyes. Cannot recommend him enough to the audience out there and to the parents out there to go check out his stuff online. Again, it's called Protect Young Eyes. And he talks about the toxic trio. And I think if I get it right, is boredom, darkness, so like nighttime, you know, and internet. So he says, you know, how many of you parents would invite a strange man into your children's bedroom at night? And of course, all the parents are like, no, of course not. And he says, well, for those of you who give your child an iPad or an iPhone or any sort of device that has internet in their bedroom at night, that's exactly what you're doing, except it's not one strange person, it's millions of them who are trying to get your kid's attention, and not for good reasons. And you could see the whole room kind of like taken aback by this example, but I think he's absolutely right that so many parents are not willing to say no and to protect their child because they want to be liked, or because their kids' friends are doing it, or social pressure, who knows. But I just think it's almost a pandemic in and of itself, as more parents need more courage to say no to their kids.
I would agree, absolutely.
So, how do you think about this from a superintendent's perspective? Because obviously there's only so much you can do. You're not the parents of these thousands of kids that you're responsible for. But when you're given a chance to, which I'm sure you are, talk to students informally, maybe, especially at the middle school and high school levels, what advice do you give them when it comes to social media and internet and whatnot?
I tried to share, I try to share stories that they can relate to. Just with the dangers, whether it's looking at people that have professional careers that have posted something on social media that comes up 10 years later. We saw that with several sports players. We saw it with Kevin Hart with the Oscars a couple of years ago, right? He was going to host the Oscars, something came back out. And one thing we're seeing now is where, students are putting things that are inappropriate on social media, kids are taking Snapchats. And then when they're getting admitted to the universities, like, hey, I'm going to the University of blank, I'm so excited. Oh, that's great, Tom, glad to hear that. And then I turn around and I email the university, you just admitted, Tom, do you know about Tom? Here's what Tom posted in 8th grade and middle school. This is the type of person you've admitted. And then we're hearing from universities that are then rescinding those offers after finding out that information.
Wow.
So it is permanent, not to mention, a lot of people are looking at social media when they're hiring people for jobs. And it may not come up when you first get hired, but believe it or somebody finds it later, it's going to come up. And it seems like in the society we live in now, there will be no explanation, not that there's ever one that should be acceptable, but people are then terminating employment for others based on things that were posted 10, 15 years ago.
Wow.
Right. So those are some of the dangers long term. It never goes away. It's not funny. You can't say, oh, I was just joking.
That's not the world we live in anymore.
Yeah, that boss or that school doesn't care if it was a joke back then. It's no longer relevant. Well, maybe we can wrap up here with a book recommendation. What book would you recommend to the audience here, Pat?
So last one I read is a little different. So I'll recommend it. It's called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
Yeah.
And really, you got it?
I think I have it. I know I have it. It's not right there. I was going to pull it out, but it's in my bookshelf somewhere.
So one of the things I want to do within our BOM, we're creating these new STEAM spaces. And when it comes to design thinking, I really want to pull in some of the things from the book. And then, I've reached out to a university on the West Coast that really is known for their design thinking, and to see if we can somehow get a partnership with them. And then, train some of our staff to use that with our students in these new STEAM spaces that we're creating. Again, focusing on that problem solving and that critical thinking. You're going to fail. All these things that have been invented, it'd be difficult for me to believe that, that whatever has been invented was just one try. Well, I just tried it once and everything worked and fit into place. Whether it's the light bulb or the combustible engine or whatever else. No, there was trial and error that happened over and over and over. And I think that design thinking, rather than, oh, I just quit. I don't want to do it anymore. I just give up. One of my conspiracy theories is that that's why baseball is not as popular with young kids anymore, because you're going to fail 7 out of 10 times. And that's if you're really, really good. If you're really good. But right? If you go to the game and you strike out 4 times in a row, you didn't play well that day. You struck out. Everyone knows. So in other sports, if there's a soccer goal, what happened? Is there someone really to blame? Is the goalie, defender, no one really knows, right? No one really knows. You're not kind of put on an island like you are in that or individual sports like tennis or golf.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's a really interesting insight, Pat. I never thought about that, but I think you're spot on, and it's for everyone to see, right? Like there's the ultimate in personal accountability and personal responsibility. And if we can teach young people that it's okay to fail. Well, I think it was Thomas Edison that said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that didn't work.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Well, leaders could use a dose of that too. I think we all get tied up in our own success, and sometimes it's okay to fail. It means we're trying new things. If we're not ever failing, then we're probably not leading to a terribly exciting future.
I would agree 100%. You're not doing your job if you're not failing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks, Pat. Always a pleasure talking to you, sir. And good luck with the rest of the school year here. And we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.